So my name's John Randall. I work at the World Wildlife Fund in DC. I work in the climate change adaptation program, and my focus is on risk reduction, which is actually, it's a new position for me. I started with that group in July, and for the previous 4 years I was working in the Humanitarian Partnerships program, which is what I'm going to talk about today, which is how our group focuses on disasters. And I should say previously I was a consultant with FEMA and have done environmental impact assessments at disasters for about the past 10 years. So when I saw this topic, it was obviously something of interest to me. So you may wonder, why does World Wildlife Fund, which is an NGO that focuses on conservation, really cares about disasters? And I'll say really before the Indian Ocean tsunami, it wasn't an area we even worked on. If a disaster happened and it affected a WWF office, then we did something. Maybe we got some funding to the office to get people back on their feet, but otherwise it wasn't really a main focus of the organization until the tsunami hit. So after the tsunami hit, the American Red Cross, as you know, was very successful in their fundraising, and they launched a massive $510 million tsunami recovery program to work in Indonesia, Thailand, Sri Lanka, and the Maldives. Since they were going to have such a large footprint that was going to last beyond the typical disaster response, and it became a 5-year kind of disaster recovery program, they wanted to make sure that their projects, their water and sanitation infrastructure, their shelter, et cetera, incorporated good principles of environmental sustainability, and WWF was brought in to help them with that. So we focus on 4 main areas as they're listed here, and this is the way we worked. Essentially, it began with doing project reviews of these different types of projects. So if there was a water and sanitation water supply project proposed in the Maldives, we would review their project, provide comments on it, and hope that it would get incorporated. That was at the very beginning. I think, as you know, just reviewing the proposal doesn't necessarily have that much of an impact. So we also started planting WWF staff within the American Red Cross offices in the field, and that really kind of changed the situation on the ground. We had WWF staff and local partners in these different countries actually going out into the field looking at projects. I have a slide in the presentation I did yesterday, but it shows a house that's built in the floodplain, and that's exactly the kind of thing that we were trying to stop, was those types of effects. Some of the good new projects that came out of this partnership, we did a lot of work on solid waste management, home gardening in Sri Lanka, compost cage preparation in Sri Lanka. We piloted some innovative ultraviolet water treatment technologies. And we also did lots and lots of training with humanitarian partners on the ground. So that was the WWF American Red Cross partnership in a very small nutshell. Some of the other disaster-related work we've done was this. In 2006, we developed a global disaster outlook, a conservation perspective, and it was based on the World Bank's natural disaster hotspot data. And what we wanted to do was, WWF US focuses on 19 priority places around the world. And what we wanted to do was see how do disasters impact our different conservation investments and operations. So this was the results of the analysis. And based on this, we were able to do disaster risk reduction trainings in some of the places that are most prone to disasters around the world. We also worked on a publication called Natural Security. It was with Kathy McKinnon, who's also at the World Bank. It's looking at how do protected areas help with hazard mitigation. And I think Kelly mentioned in the summary slide that there isn't actually a lot of data. If you invest in protected areas and wetlands and natural systems, what really is the benefit to reducing disaster risk? We kind of have this general vague notion that they're helpful, but specifically, what's the benefit of investing in them? So this report goes into 8 different case studies from around the world that's looking at, if you invest in wetland protection, what kind of payoff will you get in terms of hazard mitigation? After we did this with natural disasters, we also did conflict projections and overlaid them over our priority places. Okay, yeah.
What types of conflict? Internal, governmental, or external, cross-border, border, or what?
Yeah, it was external conflict. Yeah. It's based on the Peace and Stability Ledger is where the data sets come from. So this data we haven't released yet. But. Okay, I wanted to just point out a few things. One is, we talk about this disaster cycle and the opportunities that disasters present, which may be kind of a strange concept. But the reality is that, after times of crisis and after disasters, there's a lot of public goodwill that's generated. You get massive amounts of media attention. Financial resources flow into places where they might not have gone before, and you get political pressure. So there are these opportunities after disasters. President Clinton, after the tsunami, coined the term building back better, which in concept is a good idea. I mean, a lot of times it gets interpreted as build back bigger. In the Maldives, for instance, people who were used to fishing in small boats all of a sudden had these massive boats. And can the fishery actually support increased fishing effort? I mean, probably not. So I think, when we talk about building back better, maybe it's building back more sustainably or building back safer, that type of thing. But I think there is some opportunity that's there, and if we have a plan on what needs to be done in certain areas, then it could be something that can be capitalized on. Additional program activities at WWF, apart from the tsunami, we've worked at a number of different disasters, including the Sichuan province earthquake in 2008, and that hit a panda reserve, which is where the WWF essentially started. It was its first conservation project, so it was another wake-up call. In addition to the tsunami, we did a rapid environmental assessment in Mozambique after Cyclone Jacques in 2008. WWF was one of the focal points for the sphere revisions. Do people know what the sphere revisions are? They're for the humanitarian aid sector. So for all the NGOs working in post-disaster situations, they don't have the regulations that the World Bank, USAID, et cetera, has. They agreed upon these set of regulations which are guiding principles. And WWF worked on their revisions, which I think are going to be reflected in the next round in about, 6 months or so. And we had a WWF consultant go to Haiti most recently to work with the UN Shelter Cluster as an environment advisor. One thing I mentioned about this opportunity in some ways that disasters present is there needs to be some type of preparation and training on what is it that people should be doing differently once you get into the recovery and reconstruction mode. And obviously immediate life-saving activities need to be done at the beginning, and that's priority number one. But once you start getting into this longer-term recovery and reconstruction, then this is really where the opportunity is to do things better. So one of the major outcomes of the WWF American Red Cross partnership was this Green Recovery and Reconstruction Toolkit, which we are launching this Friday. And if people are interested in it, I welcome you to come to this. And it's a 10-module training program for people doing humanitarian aid in the field. And each module is a one-day training session. And we have, this one is module 3. It's the Environmental Impact Assessment Tools and Techniques. So what are the EIA tools out there that people can use in an immediate disaster response setting? And so we have answered that question in this training module. So that's WWF's disaster work. Now, the climate change adaptation work is in a different program, and we've only just started integrating our disaster work with the climate change adaptation work. So I did want to point out what the adaptation activities are. One of the major programs we're working in is called ELAN. It's the Ecosystem Livelihoods and Adaptation Network, which came out of a MacArthur grant and is a collaboration of IUCN, WWF, and CARE. The idea is to set up a portal, essentially, to share and exchange information and develop training materials that focus on livelihoods and the environment. Since, I'm trying to think, I think it's been 3 or 4 years that we had this HSBC WWF Freshwater Climate Change Adaptation Program. And this project was about doing field-level adaptation projects in India, China, Brazil, and India, China, Brazil, and the Thames. One of the things that came out of this was this Flowing Forward report, which was written with the World Bank, which looks at how do you equip different types of water supply infrastructure for climate into the future. And it has a methodology that's called climate scenario planning, which is essentially looking at, under different climate scenarios for your infrastructure project, what's the best way to do the design. And it was launched at World Water Week in Stockholm in September. We have a USAID SCAPES program that's doing adaptation in coastal East Africa, the Himalayas, and the Amazon. There's a JEF project looking at using mangroves to improve coastal zone resiliency with a focus in Cameroon, Tanzania, and Fiji. And then internally within WWF, we've been doing, the past year, we've really been focusing just on training after training, just to get people up to speed on what is climate change, what are the impacts, how does it affect conservation, how does it affect our partners, et cetera.